Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Gangrene Chronicles podcast. I am your host, Luca and co-host. To my left, to my right, however you see him, is Vinny Massical. So first off, before we get to Vinny's first thoughts, I'd like to say thank you all for tuning in and watching this podcast. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe as well, turn that notification bell so you know when we go live or drop a new video. Also, share this out to your Jets fans, friends, or family. We'll be around as we just started this channel and for a lot more content and more, so check us out. But regardless, folks, as I said before I get to Vinny's thoughts, we will be recapping the Jets draft. We'll be talking about the roster philosophy. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to my co-host, Vinny. Vinny, how you doing? You could open up with a little bit of your first thoughts on the draft. Not fully deep because we'll obviously be diving into each pick, but give us your thoughts, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. The first thing I want to say is, man, I before I talk about the draft, I want to say, the Jordan Travis stuff that came out. I'm really feel bad for the kid, man. He worked from what's been reported. He worked very hard to try to get back, and it didn't work out. But we'll go over more about that later in the podcast. But also, as far as the draft went, I think we were okay. A lot of people kind of when we got to I believe it was like the fourth round. I think the Arian Smith pick. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were like scratching their heads a little bit. I was too because um, being with PFF and looking at his grade, he was the number 343 on the big board there.
Yeah.
So he was a little bit of a stretch. But as far as the other picks went, man, I knew they needed a safety, so they took Malachi Moore. And we'll go into it later, but I think they had a decent draft. Was it an A? No. Was it even an A minus? No. But I would say probably around a B plus, but we'll go over that later, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I as you were mentioning, not probably an A plus draft, but not like an F either. And there's obviously, if your variants of people, variants of Jet fans on Twitter. There's some people, I guess, that want to praise this draft and say, "Oh, it's an A plus." Not that I've seen many of them, honestly. There are some that are scratching their heads, as you said, Vinny, with that Aaron Smith pick and moving on from that pick towards the end of the draft. And to me, in my opinion, there's also people that say, "Oh, well, the way that the Patriots drafted was better than the Jets. Why did we hire Aaron Glenn?" Now, I need to remind some of those people who say that. And yes, we've missed the playoffs for 14 years. There are fans that are dismayed, and I hate bringing this up. And I'm not trying to be the negative Nancy or all. Um, the problem with the Jets is the results have not been good enough throughout the past 14 years. So you can critique certain draft picks, you can critique certain moves that the front office or organization makes overall. Nobody's allowing you not to do that. But to simply, put off this regime when they just drafted, 7 players, I believe it was, and just counting them out because you didn't like the selections is a little ridiculous. As I just said earlier, it's about the results. It's not about the process. If you don't have a good process, you don't have good results. Or I should say, you don't have if you don't have you don't have good results because you don't have a good process. And the problem is the Jets' process has been flawed. We don't know what could come out of this draft. These guys could be stars. These
It's
guys
only
could
May
be middle.
1st, right? So yeah.
Yeah, these guys could be middle of the road. These guys could be busts. It really, we don't know yet. That's the simple part. And we're obviously analyzing only based off their college tape. They haven't hit the pros yet. Nobody's, played a game yet. Also, the Jets haven't, coached up these guys because at the end of the day, if you want my honest opinion, just an overall thing before we go into each individual draft pick, I think a lot of this draft and how the Jets are really evaluating this roster this year is putting a lot of pressure on the coaching. If you think about it, you look at the wide receiver room. I mean, the secondary, I think, is starting to be really solid. I mean, we talked about the liking of the Andre Cisco pick. We'll talk about well, I should say the Andre Cisco free agency signing. Sauce Gardner hopefully has a bounce back here. Azariah Thomas, we'll talk about that pick as well. And I think that secondary is really starting to show some form. But just some certain areas, even the defensive line, I believe, is like they're not heavily talented, which is going to be relied on coaching. So it's almost like a boom or bust kind of thing. And I'm not saying these guys are going to get fired after year one or anything like that, but they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves for a year one coaching staff. Vinny, if you have any thoughts on that.
Um Yeah, I mean, look, like I was saying, and I know I kind of interrupted you, but look, it's May 1st, everybody.
Yeah, of course.
Let's let these guys get out on the field, man, and let's evaluate them. And you're 100% right when you said this is going to be the coaching staff to coach these guys up. Um, the guys that they picked were not bad. I mean, outside of the air, you could scratch your head about the Arian Smith
Hmm.
pick, but the if he limits his drops and can get better, because everybody needs to remember Arian Smith, the first time he stepped into a full-time role with Georgia was only last year.
Hmm.
So really nobody saw him. So I mean, if they can coach him up, maybe it's a diamond in the rough that we got in the fourth round. But we won't know until like August. We got to look at August as our date, and when me and you sit at training camp, and we're there and we're looking at these
Absolutely.
guys in whatever they're in, shorts,
Yes.
pads, whatever. We'll see them up close, and we'll be able to evaluate them better.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like with some of these guys, and again, this is like we're kind of the happy medium. Because you obviously have guys praising the draft, you have guys that are like poo-pooing the draft, and with the whole thing, the Jets have not been able to be drafted. There's some exceptions. You have Michael Carter the second, you have Jamie and Sherwood, who've come out of the mid to late rounds, and we just hope Arian Smith is one of those guys who eventually we'll get to the full analysis of the draft pick, but overall is like that diamond in the rough, as you said, Vinny. But the problem is, and we'll obviously break into this with the whole Arian Smith pick. We'll talk about it at a deeper level. Jets haven't been able to draft receivers in the second round for how many years now? Elijah Moore, he left the team. Does anyone remember the names Devin Smith and Stephen Hill? They were supposed to be burners. They ended up being busts. Devin Smith could not stay healthy. Stephen Hill was unproductive. So that's the good and the bad of it. But without further ado, should I say, with number one, the first pick of the Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji regime, to some fans disliking, we were fans of Tyler Warren at 7, and we're like, go get Warren at 7. You need your tight end. You need your playmaker. You need somebody to help Justin Fields. The Jets helped Justin Fields in a different way, and they got Armand Membu, tackle out of Missouri. I thought he was second on my draft board at 7. I really wanted Warren, just like you did, Vinny. We talked about that during the live stream.
Mhm. Right.
Um, Not really against this pick whatsoever. The Jets would eventually grab their tight end in the second round, and I think in what I talked about with the whole coaching thing, I think that's another coaching position where they're relying heavily on that, on low risk, high reward type of guys. But I'll get into that later. Membu rose his stock throughout the draft, was arguably the best tackle if it wasn't for Will Campbell, or arguably the best tackle instead of offensive lineman. Vinny, what did you think of this pick? Give the fans your thoughts on this pick.
Um, Look, I wanted Warren. I like a lot of people, I'm sure, did. This was again a guy that you had second, I had second too. Look, I said it on draft night. I'll say it again. When you can pick a guy that's gonna hold down the right side of your, and now you have two guys on the right and left side that are gonna hold down your offensive line for 10 years, 9 to 10 years, probably. Long as, knock on wood, they stay healthy. Um, if I looked further into this pick, his pass blocking and run block grades were both above 85.
Wow.
So he's gonna immediately boost this offensive line. He was among the 87th percentile among qualifiers on zone run blocks last year. So I don't know what kind of blocking scheme we're going to run, but I'm sure zone run. A lot of teams run zone run blocks, so I would think that he's going to be he'll be fine. Um, but again, if you can get a right tackle that's going to be a 9 to 10 year starter, if you didn't want Warren, this is the second best. But
Mhm.
if this is the second best, is pretty good. So I'm fine with it. And the fact that they actually did get their tight end in the second round, and they got the guy that graded very well. Hey, listen, you got two good guys now. Again, we wanted Warren, but again, hey, they did a good job here. They did a good job here. It's not a bad job. They went with the safe pick. They went with the safe
Yeah.
pick.
Yeah, and the thing is, like we jokingly said, even though we were like half serious too, like if they go defense here at 7, we're gonna log off the stream. But thank God we didn't. Thank God
Yeah.
they didn't go defense. I would have went nuts with that. But again, solidifying the offensive line. The Jets have invested heavy assets, picking Olufushanu last year in the first round. Obviously, Elijah Vera Tucker a couple of years ago. The
Mhm.
Jets, I believe, picked up his option. I think this is the last year on his contract, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So he's going to have a big year, especially health wise. You have Joe Tippmann at center. You have John Simpson, who played very well left guard last year, even though he wasn't that. When I saw it originally happen, you had Ravens fans. When the signing happened, like, okay, you guys keep him. He wasn't that good. He was somehow really good under a Keith Carter coaching staff, or I should say, Keith Carter offensive line, who we
Mhm.
all know was one of the worst offensive line coaches in the NFL.
Yeah.
And you know what? Another thing is, Vinny, everybody's at their natural position. Fashanu's left tackle. You're not
Exactly.
rotating Tippmann anymore. You're not playing musical chairs with Elijah Vera Tucker anymore,
Mhm.
where he's in a position to get hurt.
Right.
Everybody's at their own position. This is a young offensive line. There's no Tyron Smith. There's no Dwayne Brown you have to worry about.
Mhm.
Everybody is young for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah. We're not like scrambling to fill a spot. Um, and the only question mark I have on the offensive line right now is center. That's it.
Yeah,
Because he has to be more consistent at
absolutely.
center. But other than that, I think I mean I'm pretty confident this offensive line. And there are people saying that this offensive line could be the best in the league. And that's a lot of people that, even the Jet haters are saying that. So um I'm excited to see, and you have to build your team from the inside out. That's everybody tries to do that. Defensive line, offensive line. You have to do that because that's the only way you're gonna win in this league. Obviously you need the quarterback, but you also need people to protect the quarterback. So I think there's going to be some good things that this offense can do with this offensive line next year.
Absolutely. And you look at teams like the Eagles, they've built through the trenches. They have just maulers on the offensive line. Lane Johnson being one of them, Jordan Malata, all those different guys, Cam Jurgens, Lander Dickerson. Even like the Lions, they've built well with the offensive line. They've built through the trenches very well. And you know what? I also going to say, Vinny, I don't think the depth is half bad with the Jets on the offensive line. Their backup positions would be Carter Warren, Xavier Newman, Josh Myers, Max Mitchell, and Chu Okorafor.
Mhm.
Again, nobody really praises the depth of any offensive line. Says, "Oh, this is a really good depth player. He could start on this team." Nobody's really saying that. But for once, with the offensive line, again, knock wood, they're healthy. They have a solid depth. They have solid depth pieces, obviously through training camp. We'll see how they perform, like a Josh Myers or a Chu Okorafor, who obviously quit on the Patriots last year.
Mhm.
But Vinny, you also brought it up where people were saying, "Oh, this could be a top 5 offensive line. This could be a really great offensive line, a
Mhm.
really young nucleus, a really young offensive line." And
Right.
once again, the potential's there, absolutely, but it also depends on coaching. So if I have to give this grade a pick, and I was reading up on some of Joe Blewett's stuff, he does a great job for Jet X Factor, does the breakdowns. He says that through the film, his pass blocking is better than his blocking,
Mhm.
shockingly, but it's
Right.
not far off.
No. No, it's not. Definitely not. Again, he ranked above 85, on both sides, and that's better than most. So at a number 7 pick, I think I would give this pick and because it was a safe pick, I would give it an A. This pick itself,
Hmm.
just this pick alone. So definitely, they did a good job here. Again, not the guy we wanted, but you know, 1B is just as good as 1A, in my opinion. So,
Absolutely, especially when it comes to the offense and building around your quarterback. I'll give it an A as well. It would have been A plus if it was Tyler Warren, but I'm not going to complain too much since the
mm,
Jets ended up getting their tight end, which we'll get into that.
right.
But just some Bleacher Report positives and negatives dealing with Armand Membu and some of the anti Membu fans before the draft were like, "Oh, this is going to be like Mekhi Becton," and I'm like, I don't really think it's like Becton. Becton,
No.
to be fair, had more red flags before the draft than Membu did.
Mhm. Right.
So some of the positives that Bleach Report has: excellent raw strength and power, twitched up, explosive mover with a dense thick build, shows the range to beat widely aligned rushers to the spot, expand and remain balanced at the top of the QB's drop, excels widening out, hooking, and displacing the side end on wide zone runs, obviously pertaining to the run blocking skills. Notable linear improvement in technique as the 2024 season progressed. So that's a good thing that he's eventually going to get better, that the progression was linear last year in his final year. Some negatives will be tardy with the strike timing against speed to power that exposes his chest and saps his anchor. Tends to drop his eyes as defenders work off and attempt to slip his drive blocks, leaving him overextended and a little bit off balance. He will also get caught short on his aiming points in the run game or overrun his target, allowing quick penetration and combo overtakes and reach blocks, essentially overreaching and over committing, as they would say as well. And ironically, as I mentioned him, pro comparison, Dwayne Brown
Right.
for Armand Membu.
So
But go ahead.
so here's the thing that I focused on when I looked at his things, his items on PFF. I looked at, and this is going to stand out to anybody that looks at this. His overall grade. Now, his first season was 2022, and he only played 396 snaps. So that jumped up in 2023. I'm presuming that he took over as the starter, and he played in 876 snaps. So his grades in 22 was 67.6 and 67.1 in 2023 when he did take that leap in snaps. But the guy worked hard, improved himself, and his overall grade jumped up to a 90.6 in 2024. So we know he didn't allow one sack. He didn't allow a hit in all 3 seasons, and he only allowed 8 hurries in 2024. Where in 2023 he allowed 12. So I want, this guy is going to work hard. He's going to be able to be coached. Um, and we're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay, everybody. He's gonna be fine. His run block grade was an 87.6. His pass grade block was an 86.6 in 2024. Um, so I think, I think he's gonna be fine. I think he's gonna be fine. Um, you know, Membu present, and this is what PFF said about him: good hip, hamstring flexibility to sit in his stance with balance and power, low and explosive out of his stance, naturally coordinated in his movements and footwork. Feet can move quickly, looks great on the hoof as a puller or lead blocker. Now, again, as you said, he does have cons, can struggle to anchor on the edge despite being 325 pounds. So he doesn't use his weight on the outside, on the edge, as well as he probably should. Needs more strength for maintaining blocks and could use more of a finisher's mentality. So, I there's more pros than cons with him. So he's and then they said his review, his overall review is Member presented a high athletic ceiling in 2023 before his confidence and control took off in 2024, which is what you could see in the grade going up. There are times when he could play with more power, but he brings starting caliber length and movement ability to the NFL with good production as a zone blocker. So,
Absolutely. And another thing with the whole Becton thing, not that there's really much of a comparison, in my opinion. Membu is not boomer bust. Becton
no,
was boomer bust.
right,
Membu was more
exactly,
like the safe pick, as you said,
right,
Vinny. He
right.
was more like the Tristan Wirfs, I would say, I guess. I mean, we hope he's like a Tristan Wirfs, obviously, because he's worked out really well. And arguably, he's right next to Andrew Thomas for either the best tackle of that class or even some of the best tackles overall in the NFL. So we just hope Membu, lives up to that, obviously, with coaching and his linear progression, which he got better throughout college, even in 2024, as you mentioned.
Right. Right. He's again, he's worked on his game to the point where he's going to work hard. Um and um you know and I'm looking at some of these things. He has a 45-degree vertical.
Wow.
Um uh he has a he's an athletic guy. He's a multi-sport athlete as well. He played football. He was in football, wrestling, and tennis.
Wow.
So the guy is he can move. This guy.
I didn't even know he
So
played tennis. Right?
yeah,
Wrestling, I can imagine.
yeah.
I didn't know he
Just
played
imagine
tennis.
a big guy like that playing tennis. I'd be scared of him, but you
I
know,
mean, you know what? Here's the
but
thing with tennis, you're moving laterally.
you're moving
So,
laterally. Exactly, exactly. So that lateral movement is there. So I mean, just look. I mean, and then wrestling. So he's powerful. So yeah.
strength, lateral quickness, that's all I wanna hear, but final grade on the Armand Membu pick, I went A, Vinny went A, so we're gonna go to pick number 2, round 2, pick 43. Out of LSU, tight end Mason Taylor, who is the son, I believe, of former Jet,
Oh, he
most
is,
notably former Dolphin, Jason Taylor.
and the nephew of Joy Taylor.
That is correct. Vinny, if you wanna offer your first thoughts on this pick.
So he's played over 2,300 snaps across 3 seasons at LSU. He didn't have the receiving production that obviously Warren had,
Mhm.
but he's going to be 21 years old this month,
Wow, he is
so
young.
he's still young.
Younger than me.
Yeah, there you go. Um, he's coachable. Um, and I believe, and I think the Jets believe that he's got a lot of upside. Um, I'm just reading some of his overall grade was a 67.8, which is in the green, which isn't bad.
Right.
Again, he had 55 receptions in 2024. He was targeted 79 times. He had 546 yards. He had 9.9 yards per reception and 2 touchdowns. So not bad. Um, I just think his upside is where they really wanted this guy. So I would give this pick probably around a B plus,
That's fair.
just because you know they're saying he's tight end 2-3 candidate. I think he could be a tight end 1 for us, just because I think he's gonna improve. Again, he's only 20. He's only going to be 21 this month, so he's
Absolutely.
still young. But you know, I just his route running's good. He has a large catch radius, which Warren had too. Um, and he's got the size that he could play in line or he could play at the slot. So, you know, good pick.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was a good pick as well. Most people saw him as more of a third round pick, but the Jets picked him in the second. I don't think there was largely enough of a difference. I don't remember which tight ends were available there. I mean, Fannin, I think, was uh, Gunnar Helm, who I think went, I don't remember which round he went into, but largely a lot of Jets content creators, or I should say, I was watching Matt O'Leary, and he's like, you know what, in the second round, this was after day one, obviously, previewing day two. He's like, in the second round, the ideal target is Mason Taylor for tight end because the Jets need a pass catcher. And he's also an adept blocker, as you said. He could play in line. And I actually wrote a scouting report up on Mason Taylor prior to the Senior Bowl. Um, his stats for last year: 55 receptions, 546 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and 9.9 yards per reception. I was not high on him at all. He did rise through the Senior Bowl quite a bit. And as you said, Vinny, his production did not match up with his overall talent level. But
Mhm.
may I also add, I should say on day two, I was talking with Diggy, Alex's good buddy and giant content creator, who's also an LSU fan. I said, you know what, Diggy, let me pick your brain on this. What's Mason Taylor like? He's like, I don't want to say he's like a jack of all trades. He does a lot of things good, but he's also a very timely catcher. He gets a lot of clutch
Mhm.
catches when you need.
Right.
He moves the chains. That's very big as well. And Vinny, you mentioned his frame size makes good for a red zone target. Lineup versatility, slot, inline, outside, very much so.
Mhm.
Reliable hands. He's also a capable inline blocker with good hand placement and footwork. At least I saw.
Mhm. Right.
But some of the weaknesses, again, not really, just rather minor. Does not possess game breaking speed. His 40-yard dash. I'm going to try to get it up real quick. I this was updated around the Senior Bowl for my thing at least. It was a 4.65, which I think is the 80th percentile, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Not too bad, but again, he's not. There's how often do you see a tight end as a burner? They're
Right,
mostly stretching the
right.
field, not elite speed, but it doesn't matter on that end. Concerning lack of red zone production, I think that only gets better with a quarterback like Justin Fields
Right.
and just overall variance of production. Hopefully,
Mhm.
they get that's through coaching as well to get him the targets and work on those different things. When I saw his blocking a little bit, he does tend to open up his hips a little too early, and
Mhm.
also he does lack a bit of physicality versus press man in terms of separation. But I think
Yeah,
he's more of a finesse type of player. He's not
that
physical.
well, and here's the other thing.
Mhm.
He needs to put on a little more weight. He
Yes.
he needs he has a lack of weight, so his fighting in the trenches isn't great. Um, they're saying he might need to put on another like 10 pounds, is what they're saying, because
Gotcha.
he's a little too slender for inline. But if he gets stronger, which he will, he's only like I said, he's only 21 this
Yeah,
month.
absolutely.
He'll get stronger and he'll be fine. Once he gets stronger, that again, having the athletic frame is the start, but it's then now it's your coaching, now it's your weight training staff to put a little more weight on him, put a little more muscle on him, make him a little stronger, and then you're looking at a complete player. So if he does that, now I'm not saying if he puts on 10 pounds and gets stronger, he's automatically going to be that great player like I don't know, like a Tony Gonzalez or a Graham or any of those guys, but he can be a productive player for us for sure.
Yeah, looking closer, and obviously he rose through the Senior Bowl and throughout the combine process. You said it. I don't think he's going to be a tight end 2 or 3. I think he'll eventually be a one. I was looking at also some of the pro comparisons per Bleacher Report. It's funny because I was reading the original Bleacher Report scouting report, which was posted I think prior to the Senior Bowl and was around those months. They said he was like a Mark Andrews type, but when they did the Jets report, they put him as like a Tucker Craft. I don't mind either of them, but like it's just a weird variance in my opinion because one's
Right.
obviously better than the other.
Right, because yeah, Andrews is definitely an all pro talent. You know, I mean, who who does Lamar count on most of
Mark
the
Andrews.
times when he can't exactly? So you want the same. So I would tend to say, yeah, I hope he's a Mark Andrews, um, but I think he's still going to have that relationship with Fields. When he busts out of the pocket, something breaks down. I think he's going to be able to get, to find uh, with with um, with his athleticism. I think he'll be able to find him, and then breaking off a route. I think Taylor will be fine too. To be that security blanket for Fields.
Yeah, I agree. It's gonna be that safety blanket. I'm gonna give this a B plus. I don't remember if I was reading this in the scanning reports or not. Is his yak limited? Because I think somebody said that he has trouble breaking tackles after the catch. I could be wrong, or is that somebody else? Not sure.
He was tied for 49th in missed tackles forced, so he only had 5 of those.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I think as you mentioned with the whole body weight thing of gaining some bulk, at least 10 pounds. I think that's gonna get
right.
better through time.
But with contested catches, he was tied for 8th. So he had 8 contested catches. So if you think about it, yeah, he doesn't make a lot of tackles missed, but when you're talking about contested and going up for those contested balls, yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. And again, if he puts on more weight, that's going to even go up more because he's going to be a bigger guy and a stronger guy. So
Yeah, in due time. In due time. Give me 1 second. So with that selection, Vinny, I got to go B plus. You get your tight end. Not in the first round though. Second round is just as good because also as well wild praised. This draft class was praised as very tight end heavy, and it was a lot of depth. So it wasn't top heavy, well balanced. The Jets get a balanced blocker. The Jets get a balanced receiver, and I'm happy about it because the Jets badly need a tight end one, and I think Mason Taylor can become that.
definitely agree.
So this pick was interesting, and I'm not going to say I didn't like it. I was kind of stunned at first. I can't lie to you. So in the third round, the New York Jets went, I thought, BPA. At number three, round three, picked 73 overall. They picked Azariah Thomas out of Florida State, corner. Vinny, your thoughts first.
If anybody is gonna find a corner, I trust in Aaron Glenn. Um, he's a 6'2" press corner. He got a decent coverage grade at 76.5. He only allowed a 50.2 passer rating.
Wow. I didn't even
So, and
know
he
that.
didn't give up a single touchdown last season.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
If you're looking at corners that haven't given up touchdowns in their final season as a college player, Sauce Gardner and Azariah Thomas are the two guys you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So, going into a little bit more as far as against your Notre Dame Fighting Irish in week 11, he had a 69.1 rating, which was pretty good. I mean, you're looking at, anything between, 69, 70 is really good. It's in the
Yeah,
green.
with
So,
that light green color, it's usually like
yeah.
above average to good.
Yeah, so he was good, and he was above average. He was average to above average in every game he played last season. He was 69.5 against Duke in week 8 at Duke. Now remember, these are at Duke and at Notre Dame.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
he played well against those two teams. He was a 68.3 against Clemson last year. Um, you know, again, he was targeted 33 times. He gave up 141 yards last year, and he had one pick and 0 touchdowns in 12 games played. So, and for his career, he only gave up 4 touchdowns.
Wow.
Um, so he was very good, and the passer rating went down. I mean, he gave up a 119.3 passer rating in 2022, his first full season, on
Mm-hmm.
327 defensive snaps, and I don't even think that was a full season, really.
Right.
Brought that down to an 89.2 in 2023, and then it sunk down to a 50.2 in 2024. So again, a guy that's improved. Um, and he's not going to be a box corner. He only played in the box 49 times. Um, he played in the slot only 18 times last year. So he's not going to be so being a slot corner, but if anybody can teach him, it's going to be Aaron Glenn.
Absolutely. Well said.
And those are going to be, and I don't mind this pick
No.
at that spot. Um, so I would give it I would give it a B. I would give it a B for sure. But yeah, I like the player, so I'm not too worried about where it was picked. I would have liked to have seen maybe another offensive player here at 3,
Yeah.
but the guy that they picked, I think, is going to be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was like one of the things I was questioning me. I'm like, okay, why didn't they go wide receiver? They didn't go wide receiver yet.
Right, right.
The one and the whole thing about the whole Azariah Thomas thing, as you mentioned, didn't really play in the box, didn't really play in the slot. Is it possible that Brandon Stevens moves to safety?
That's what a lot of
That,
people are saying, and I think that could be a possibility. I think that could be a
because the
possibility.
interesting thing is with Stevens and with Thomas, both very sticky corners, physical. Now, I don't know how many penalties Thomas had last year in his college career, but we know the penalties were a problem with Stevens last year and years prior. And the whole Stevens contract we went over in the first episode has a lot of risk associated with it. Not so much the contract, but the player that he's late in his 20s. He didn't exactly have a great year in a contract year last year. So I think Thomas, in my opinion, I think he better fortifies the secondary as Sauce Gardner's opposing corner. Um, Obviously, I think he's a day one starter. I think the Jets had really good value on this pick in terms of BPA. That's why I was kind of miffed. I'm like, okay, they didn't draft for need here. They went BPA, which is fine. And as you said, Vinny, Aaron Glenn, a former corner, he's going to tutor Azariah Thomas. And the one knock on Thomas is just two things: not elite speed in terms of recovery speed, and he doesn't really force a lot of turnovers. So that those things obviously can improve. I think the lack of recovery speed. I think will stand out. Not so much like as a bad thing, but like I think that could be like one of the only weaknesses in his game. And also as well, the lack of turnovers. I think that'll get better. But you know what? Here's the thing though. If you don't have corners throwing to Sauce Gardner and you don't have corners throwing to Thomas, I'm fine with that.
Right. Right. And you got to remember, we talked about Stevens getting beat deep a lot last year.
Yes.
So maybe playing safety might actually be better for him since he doesn't have to necessarily be on the receiver either close to the line of scrimmage. Maybe he gets that, jump as far as being further away from the line of scrimmage.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I think you have the ability now to adjust if you need to with this pick too. So
Absolutely.
again, I think it's a good pick. I was trying to bring up the penalties. I couldn't find those. So, um, but
I'm gonna try to find out the penalties as well,
right.
because again, we talked about physical corners. Thomas's physical corner, sticky corner. We mentioned just now Brendan Stevens very physical corner, but the problem was he drew a lot of penalties last year. Not a good sign. So I'm gonna pull
Oh,
up
I
the
have, I have, I have the penalties here.
gotcha. How many did he
Looks
have?
like he had three.
Is that in his career or is that over
That
the course?
is gonna be that's gonna be his career. It says.
Wow,
I'm seeing only three penalties.
that's very good.
Um,
Very
so
good.
yeah. So looks like he had. Well, no, I'm sorry. This was just last year. So it looks like he
Okay.
had
Okay.
one in week 10, one in week 9, and one in week 6.
Even then, that's not terrible. That's not
No, no.
because it's not like
So he
I'm sure
played
that
Miami. So he played Miami in week 9, North Carolina in week 10, and Clemson in week 6. So those are three teams that actually are not bad at throwing the football. So, you know, that, I'll take three in a season.
yeah,
And yeah, that was
those are
definitely his
light.
season. Yeah.
Those are light. It's not like they're targeting him on purpose, but
Right.
again, obviously
Right.
mistakes happen. That'll
Right.
get cleaned up. But
Right.
another thing as well, just like mentioning with his positives, he's also a willing tackler. He's physical in the run game, and we mentioned that Brandon Stevens possibly moving to safety. Maybe he's better in the box because you have the free safety of Cisco. You
Right.
have the strong safety who's closer to the box, and that could be Brandon Stevens, who less pressure on him to get beat deep. But
Right.
maybe they use him to blitz.
Right.
Maybe they use him to stop the run.
Because
Maybe he's
because he
he's
is a more physical guy. Right. Exactly.
exactly,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yep.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right. Exactly.
And I gotta again, not to be like copying you, but it's like I
Hmm.
gotta go with the B here as well.
Right. Right.
Good value pick in terms of BPA. He was a third round corner. It's not like, he's not a starter day one. He probably will be and should be. But I think the Jets could have went wide receiver here. I think Jalen Noel might have been on the board. There's some
Yeah.
other
There
wide
was
receivers
there
on the
was
board.
some receivers that were on the board at 73.
Yeah, and I think just in the overall terms of viewpoint, in terms of the overall draft, my ideal sense, I would have went. And this is not now we're concluding the draft, the whole thing. There's obviously more picks we got to go through. I would have probably went double wide receiver, and I would probably would have double dipped at tight end too. But that's just me. I'm just a fan. But I think I would have invested in the weapons alongside Justin Fields. But Thomas, I'm giving this a B, solid B, in terms of BPA. But I do think the Jets could have went a different direction here. Now, the ultimate head scratcher, round 4 at pick 110. The Jets take a risk. They go wide receiver for the first wide receiver and only wide receiver, that be it. Wide receiver out of Georgia, Arian Smith, 110th overall in the 4th round. And I'll start by saying when he was at the Senior Bowl, he was impressive with his speed. But my buddy Brian, who we obviously we're with on the draft show, big Georgia fan, says not a big fan of him. Has great speed, absolute crap ton of drops. Vinny, if you want to further analyze the pick and we could piggyback.
You know what? There was really they didn't have an analysis on Arian Smith. as far as his as far as anything went, as far as that went. But I will tell you this: his grade as far as overall last year was a 57.7.
That's not good.
Um, he had those 10 drops.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, his yards per reception went down season to season. So his first season in 2022, he only played in 50 snaps, but he averaged 28.3 yards per reception. Okay, so
In
that
a
was good. That was
Yeah,
positive
although in a limited sample
in a
size.
limited sample size. But then when he got more snaps, he was only in, again, the following season, he was only in 129 snaps and he averaged 19.1. But when he was asked to be in a larger role with 441 snaps, his average dipped to 16.7,
Mhm.
and he had 801 yards on 48 receptions and 72 targets. This is kind of one of those things where I'm like, his drop rate was 17.2. Um, his grade against man coverage was 51.5. Um, I can't give you any real positives as far except for, yes, his speed, great speed. He wasn't even great on contested catches. He was like 402nd, 22nd, and only had two. So he's a 6 foot 185 receiver. I did not understand this pick. I didn't like it.
Mhm.
Um, again, uh, he was 343 on the big board for PFF. And again, he was only the full time role he only took over in 2024. So he
Yeah.
hadn't even had any. So I guess you could say they thought he has a lot of upside. His only full time role was only one season, which was
That's right.
last year. That's the only thing I could think that would, and that the coaches can improve him. You know, um, again, I go as far as giving this a C. And it could be a D, could be a C minus, but I will give it a C just because we really don't know what this is going to be. Because but I would give it a C only because it was a reach.
Yeah,
If we knew
absolutely.
more about him, and again, some people would give it a D for it being a reach, but I just didn't understand this pick at all.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I had an interesting reaction when I first saw the pick. I was like, actually not bad because I knew Arian Smith and I first bought into the speed, but then I'm like, fourth round, he was more of like a sixth, seventh guy. And some people even saw him like some draft experts like, okay, maybe at most he's like a special teamer. Because you know what? Here's the thing. Speed's great and all, but that doesn't always mean you're going to be a starter and you're going to work out in the NFL. Look at John Ross. John Ross, I think, originally I think it was before Xavier Worthy set like the record for 40 time at the 40-yard NFL Combine. He turned out to be a big bust for the Cincinnati Bengals. Speed does not always win. It's other traits as well. Can you catch the ball? Can you run routes? Can you get open for your quarterback? And elite top end speed, okay, great, but also not great at hand catchers. As you said, 17% drop rate in 2024. Also, not a big body guy in terms of could go up and can drop, make contested catches, and he's not a great route runner either. So there's a lot of coaching there. If it works out and he becomes a starting receiver, that's great. You find yourself a fourth round receiver. It's been done before with guys like Gabe Davis. But in terms of what they could have done in round three with a wide receiver like a Jalen Noel, who I think was more pro ready, and I think the value would have matched up great, and a guy who has a lot of risk associated with this pick. And yes, I get it. People say, oh, well, it's the fourth round, it's the latter rounds. You take risks. Okay, fine. But my problem is, Vinny, is there's not a lot of talent in that Jets wide receiver room.
No,
It's Garrett Wilson, and then it's just a lump of clay. No
right.
disrespect to anybody else.
Right.
You have
We have a
Allen.
lot of these guys too. Xavier Gibson's one of those guys.
Yeah.
Malachi Corley's one of those guys. There's guys that we've taken risks on in the draft, Um, but I mean, why do it? I just don't understand the the thing. And then you sign Josh Reynolds in free agency and Tyler Johnson. I just am not. I don't know. I think you could have went in a different direction here. Um, I don't understand this pick at all. I just don't.
Yeah, neither do I. And I get it in terms of positional sense, but the value didn't match up. It's a very high risk player. And again, with all the bodies in the wide receiver room outside of Garrett Wilson, and I was reading Michael Nani's article from like free agency when free agency was around, basically saying that the Lions don't exactly have what when they coach the Lions, it was wide receiver 2 by committee and wide receiver 3 by committee. And the problem is when you're supposed to evaluate a quarterback like Justin Fields, when he's trying to revive his career, you need weapons around him. Garrett Wilson's great
Exactly.
in terms of chemistry. He's number one. A
Right.
1,000 yards every year he's played. I love Garrett Wilson. That's fine. But eventually, defenses will, if you don't know how to coach these guys or if you don't have enough talent, Garrett Wilson will eventually be doubled. And these guys like Arian Smith and Xavier Gibson and Malachi Corley and Alan Zorb will have to beat these guys one on one. I'm sorry, even though they restructured his contract, I still don't believe in Alan Lazard. I think he should have been cut.
And do we need another guy that's going to drop the ball too? Because
No,
Lazard
not
had a
at all.
lot of drops last year.
Not at all.
Um,
He was, and the problem
yeah.
is with Lazard. My biggest problem was he was like unreliable without Aaron
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
With Aaron Rodgers off the field in 2023, remember the Jets made him inactive for like 2-3 games because of how bad he was with Zach
Right.
Wilson. Again,
Right.
I'm not giving Zach Wilson any type of credit or leaving him
Mm-hmm.
blameless, but
Right.
he was dreadful.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
So in
So.
terms of the wide receiver and the pick, probably my most critical of the ones that I did know of, I'm gonna go C minus. I'm not in love with this pick more
Mm-hmm.
so than you, Vinny. I know you went C, which is fine.
Right.
I'm going C minus. Definitely could have went a different direction here, as you said, in terms of position. They could have went defensive tackle. I think there were still some defensive tackles
Yeah.
available.
I
Anais
definitely
Anais Peebles, and again, another position defensive tackle that is mostly a bunch of veteran guys who we don't know about, besides Quinn Williams, who are
Mm-hmm.
just like who's the one guy? Byron Coard. He's
Mm-hmm.
solid, but is he going to be your starter? Is he going to be a
Yeah.
rotation guy? The rest of the
Yeah.
guys like Tuafeli and Derek and Nadi, they're terrible. They're
And you
so
also
bad.
saw Quentin Williams kind of, I mean, if you think about it, he took a little bit of a step back last year because he
Did
saw so many double teams last year that he was getting overwhelmed. You can't just rely on one guy on the defensive line to just do everything. You have to have those guys that are the run stoppers, because Quinnen is going to be your, like, I mean, I'm going to compare him to Aaron Donald because a lot of people do, but he's your Aaron Donald. You got to have
Mhm.
guys around him in
Absolutely
order to do the other stuff, like stop the run, maybe get in on the passer every so often. But we don't have a run stopper
no.
on that defensive line. This is where you could have taken that run stopper right there. This is where you could have taken that big guy,
Yeah,
but you didn't.
absolutely.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is with Quinn Williams and all those different things, like the Giants drafted Darius Alexander in the third round. They have a mean, nasty defensive line. But just in terms of that, it's just like it wasn't a great pick. And you said it best, Vinny, with Quinn Williams. Obviously he's relied on the Jets star defensive lineman. I think I would actually argue that he's regressed in the last 2 years. But this year, I think, was more evident, and he's taking on a lot more double teams. But this is a defensive tackle is another position, in my opinion, where you simply just don't know outside of Quinn and Williams. Like Coard is solid; he's going to be a solid rotational guy. He's definitely better than the likes of Solomon Thomas, but overall, not a great position. I'm just going to look at some of the guys after, like Ty Robinson was
Mhm.
picked immediately after by
Yeah,
the
Ty
Philadelphia
Robinson would have
Eagles.
been a good pick there too.
There's some other picks. I mean, Etienne really didn't need. Gunnar Helm was picked after you if you want to go double tight end.
Mhm.
But in terms of that, I would have went defensive tackle. Maybe if you want to add offensive lineman, but regardless, not a great pick. I'm going C minus here.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't blame you for having that opinion because again, I'm a little. I guess I'm like a quarter of a grade higher than you, but
Yeah.
I'm just not. And I think again, it's just the reach on that
Hmm.
pick, and you could have had a better player here. I
Absolutely.
think. So, but anyway,
100%. And we'll move on to the next pick. This is still in round four. The Jets actually traded up with the Philadelphia Eagles for this pick. They picked Malachi Moore, safety out of Alabama. Um, Jets needed some help in the secondary. What I heard from Alex, and I think Malachi Moore, if I'm not mistaken, was at the Senior Bowl or he wasn't. And Alex, I remember, I think, did a scouting report on him. Basically, defined him as a guy that needs a kind of specialized role. And I think it's perfect with the Jets because I've said this countless times. Their scheme now, they're still 4-3 in the base, or I should say 4-2-5 now, but their emphasis is strongly on the secondary. And if Malachi Moore can be coached up by any team, it's with Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes having a focus in the secondary. And Vinny, we've talked about it constantly. The safety position for the Jets has been bad for years. Cisco was a good pickup, and obviously we have yet to see the results of that. Tony Adams has been very underwhelming, and he's been terrible in my opinion. I think some fans even overrate him, but I think Moore is a nice addition in terms of role player kind of guy. But feel free to give your thoughts.
well, you know, he. I like this pick only because number one, he played for Alabama, so there you go. That right there, um, he saw a lot of good teams during his year. He's another guy who progressively went up in grade. He went from a 66.8 to a 77, and then finished with an 84.9. He's gonna be. He posted a coverage grade of 91.8 and a run defensive grade of 81. So not bad. 51 tackles in 2024. Only missed 5 tackles all year, where he missed 9 the year before. So he definitely improved in that. Um, Very good player. I mean, he lined up in the box 219 times. He lined up in the slot 180 times. He lined up deep 350 times. So he seems like he's versatile as well. Um, so I like this pick. I thought it was a good pick. I have to give this pick a B. I wanted, obviously I wanted Xavier Watts, but he was going to get taken before,
Yeah.
way before. So the fact that they filled the need in safety, I definitely give this a B for sure.
Definitely. And the thing, as I said, the Jets need help in the secondary. And the thing with Watts was I loved Watts as the prospect. The problem was Watts and Cisco would be redundant because they're both free safeties and they both play, deep. But with Moore, and it's interesting because, the Jets could throw out some fronts where they run three safeties. And they did that a little bit last year, even though there was different coaching staff and different emphasis. I wouldn't be surprised if they run three safeties where they have maybe two in the box or one deep or two deep or one in the box, something like that. But I see this kind of guy like a Swiss Army knife almost. He is not like the Ashton Davis pick. My God, was that a terrible pick in the third round as the proposed Swiss Army knife where he would do a lot of things, but appropriate value for round four, in my opinion. Just looking up some positives real quick per Bleach Report. Ball hawk with very good range as a deep safety, drives and attacks the ball in the air. Good instincts and awareness of his threats in zone coverage. You mentioned the different alignments, which comes with the versatility and secure tackler in the open field. The Jets need secure tacklers, man. And a lot of the problems last year, I'd say, and even the year before, is a lot of missed tackles, especially coming from the secondary where the safety play was so bad. But and another thing that was posted by Bleacher Report, I read up on this. Not a big banger, more of a rap tackler. I really don't see that as a negative, to be honest. We need more rap tacklers. Too many players go for the big hit and they miss too badly.
Right. And the one thing about him also, he's also a high IQ. He knows what he's doing. And again, he's got experience in the slot, free safety. He does lack ideal length.
Yeah.
He's not a top end athlete, is what they said. But his production has always been good. So they're saying he's a reliable depth option. I don't know. Maybe he can be a starter for us. Um, I think he can be, but again, the coaching staff's gonna have to coach him up. So
Absolutely, man. And the interesting thing, Vinny, is his pro comparison, and I would love, absolutely love. You mentioned he has the potential to be a starter. His pro comparison per Bleacher Report, again, obviously it's depends on who you talk to and whatnot. Devin McCourty,
I would take that for sure. That's a big time guy to be compared to.
big time safety. Obviously, we knew who he was playing for the Patriots for so many years, but if he becomes that guy, and again, I think he'll start out as a small role, but eventually over time, maybe he replaces Andre Cisco, maybe he replaces Tony Adams, because I think this year, if I'm not mistaken, is the last year on Tony Adams' contract because I think they tendered him, if I'm not mistaken, but he's still just got one more year left. So maybe he's out the building next year and the Jets want to
Yeah, I
go
don't.
different
I
direction.
didn't like seeing Tony Adams last year in the lineup when he was in there because he just was not it last year at all.
Yeah, I found a lot of the times he was either missing tackles or he was just lost in coverage,
Exactly.
and the Jets, I think, if I'm not mistaken, picked him up in 2022 as an undrafted free agent, and it was like one of those things where you take a shot, but they missed. So
Right. Right.
not that huge of a deal. It's not like he was missing a draft pick, but it was an undrafted free agent. You took a shot, you missed. Regardless, moving on to the fifth round for the New York Jets. I'm going to pull up the banner here. Round five, pick 162, we have linebacker Francisco Mauigoa out of Miami. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I didn't know who this was prior to the Jets being drafted. And yes, I was working at the time, but just the depth guy, I guess. Don't really know much to say about him. I mean, I'll look at his strengths and weaknesses, but he's probably like a backup special teamer. The Jets do have I guess, a decent amount of bodies in the linebacker room. I'll pull it up the depth chart. They have Quincy, they have Jamin Sherwood, they have Zion Barnes, they have more Jamin Davis. They also have Francisco Mauigoa, who aforementioned just talked about the draft pick, and Marcelino Maricrari Ball. But this is just kind of a depth guy. Not really much expecting, but I think this is like when we start to really get down to the final draft picks, and you're just kind of like to the reaction. But Vinny, if you have any thoughts on this draft pick, feel free to add in any insight.
The only thing I could say about this guy was, he did have 46 pressures, um,
Hmm.
but he had a different role, so he was kind of taken in a different role at Washington State. So he wasn't really, I don't know. I don't know. He played at Washington State his first 2 years, and then he transferred. So he was used a little differently. So I really, and a lot of people I don't think really know about this guy unless they saw him on tape, which I hadn't looked at um, him at all. So again, another another high. I guess they saw a high ceiling on this guy, and so they took him at five in the fifth round at 162. So um, you know, could be a depth piece, I would think at most.
Yeah,
But I would be very surprised if he takes over for like a Quincy Williams or somebody. That would be a stretch, I think.
that would be an incredible shot in the dark. And just looking at some of the things that Bleacher Report was saying, backup draftable, sixth, seventh round. That's the projected grade and whatnot in terms of the projection as well. One thing that Joe Douglas, our former general manager, did love was the RAS score. I forget what actually that's abbreviated to. I think it's raw athletic score, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. Let me see. Hold on. I'm looking up in the iPad here. RAS score. Here we go. Relative athletic score. There we go. Joe Douglas loved RAS score, guys, and he earned a 9.14, which is solid size for a modern linebacker. Tested well at the combine. Decent instincts against the run, has good speed when coming downhill to shoot gaps. Uses hands well in coverage to force reroutes, plays the hands well at the catch point to break up some passes. Negatives, slow run pass transitions against play action will leave the middle of the field open. So I guess it's a play recognition thing. Takes poor angles in pursuit, especially against the outside runs, and struggles to break down and lunges when trying to make open field tackles. Also, a subpar route recognition. with Maui Goa. But yeah, I don't know really much to say about this draft pick. Again, I'm just kind of learning about him now, just like you are, Vinny. It's a depth piece. I'm not sure if you could argue the Jets could have went another direction, but the problem is you kind of could because you had Mitchell Evans if you wanted a blocking tight end, just to throw a chance, who was actually picked right after the Jets at 163 from the Carolina Panthers. The Steelers also picked up a rotational defensive tackle in Yaya Black out of Iowa. And I'm not, being nitpicky for the sake of being nitpicky, but did the linebacker position really need depth? And I'm just
Right.
again not being nitpicky, but it's just a general question.
Um, I I don't, unless they're thinking that they're not going to re-sign Quincy and they needed another piece. But again, I think you could have had somebody next year. Maybe you could have picked somebody next year. But I think this is more of a depth piece. I mean, I'm looking at his grades, and I did find his grades from last year that he was a seven. He had a overall 74.7 defensive rating, which isn't bad, and he didn't have many bad games last year. But he didn't. He also, he played well against Syracuse. He played really well against Wake Forest. He did not play well against Georgia Tech. He did not play well against Duke. He played well against Florida State with a 72.2. He did not play well against Louisville. Um, and then he played well in his first three games against Florida, Florida A&M, and Ball State. But then again, that's Florida A&M and Ball State.
Yeah,
And
that's
Florida
not much.
wasn't. I don't believe Florida was the same team last year.
No, they were
Um,
bad.
so I mean, so his run, run defense grade was an 84. So he plays well against the run. Maybe that's why they selected him. Maybe he's a you know first and second down run defender. That's a situational guy. I don't know. So his tackling grades were horrible. Um,
Yeah,
he against Louisville, he had a 28.5 tackling grade. He had a 3-game stretch where his tackling grades were under 30. So I don't know. Maybe he had bad games. Maybe he had lack of concentration in those games. But I'm just, again, he's a guy that is going to need to be coached up. So
absolutely. And as you're just mentioning of the tackle grades, two weaknesses that were mentioned were the struggles to break down and poor lunges. I should say poor angles in pursuit, especially against the outside runs. So a work in progress depth pick, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I would be kind of alarmed if this guy were to take over Quincy Williams' spot, unless somehow the Jets work some magic and he becomes this guy that we don't even know that we didn't originally know about. To somebody like, oh well, this is a really good starter on the linebacking core alongside Sherwood. So we'll see with this pick. What would you give this a grade?
I'm going to have to give this, I would have to say this is probably I'd say a C
I'm right with you.
on
It's a
this
C.
one.
It's like a C.
Yeah.
It's a
So,
depth pick, but I
yeah.
think they again. I'm not nitpicking for no reason, but I think they could have went another direction.
Mhm.
Um, and, and I'm not mistaken, they trade up twice in the
Yeah.
back half. I'm trying to
Yeah.
look here. So first of all, this pick, the fifth round pick that they used in Maui Go, was originally given. This was originally. We'll start with the origins. The Steelers traded Kevin Dotson to the Rams. The Rams sent this pick to the Steelers, and then the Jets traded Mike Williams at the end of the deadline last year to the Steelers, and the Steelers gave them this pick back. So just it was moved around 2 to 3 teams, but regardless, meh. That's what I can say.
Yeah.
Meh. Not too
Yeah.
much of a reaction there. But the final pick of this draft of 2025 with the 176th pick was an edge player by the name of Tyler Barron, who ironically comes from the same college, Miami, if I am not mistaken. Just want to make sure
Yep.
I'm right now.
Yep.
Yeah. He was actually graded out to be a fourth round player. I'm going to look up some of his stats as well. Vinny, do you have any insight on Tyler Barron? Also picked in.
Um, yeah, he had 10 sacks, 10 quarterback hits, 28 hurries last year. He ended last year with a grade of 76.1. He did have and this is going to be basically, this is a pass rush depth piece
Yeah, absolutely.
because his pass rush grade was 84.4. So His true pass rush grade was a 90. Um, he's not a great run defender.
Hmm.
His run defense grade was a 76.7, which isn't bad. Um, and he lined up last year outside the outside the tackle 63 times, over the tackle 65 times. So he's definitely a true outside guy. Um, but again, he's not, NFL caliber frame, pros NFL caliber frame, both height and weight. Slightly undersized for an edge, but
Hmm.
could put more weight on his lower half. I don't know how that's a pro, but I guess they listed that as a pro. Uh, Good natural athlete with balance, strength, and speed. Consistent leg drive for ball rushes and getting off blocks. Decent agility to cross face of blockers. And then his cons were too many snaps where he has a false start or doesn't fire off his front foot. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't like the false start part of it because we had way too many penalties last year.
Yes,
Pass rush move lacked precision and purpose right now. Needs to develop more counters to get off blocks quicker and could
absolutely.
stand to be more violent when converting speed to power. So again, another guy that's going to need to be coached.
And it's also interesting as well. He's going to be 24 years old at the start of the season. He was born on October 22nd, 2001. Quite old for a depth piece. And I'm not trying, again, not trying to be nitpicky, but 24 years old, going to be a depth guy. He did play some of his college tenure at Tennessee as well. But this is more of a depth pick. He's actually projected to be, he was, as I said, projected to be a fourth round pick, potential role players. They say he's more of a rotational piece, what we kind of see him as. Pro comparison to Dwayne Smoot, who I think plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars, if I'm not mistaken, more of a rotational guy. I could be wrong on that. I'm just going to check his current team right now. He currently, yeah, previously played with the Jacksonville Jaguars, so I wasn't wrong off on that. But any grade, I would probably go C. I mean, you could argue C plus because we do need some depth on the edges more so than we needed linebacker. So that's probably like a small uptick in a grade because I'll lay out the depth chart now for edge rushers. You have Barron, you have Will McDonald, you have Jermaine Johnson, you have Michael Clemens. You also have the UDFAs from last year, Braden McGregor and Eric Watts. The Jets also signed Rashad Weaver in free agency, who was more of a, I guess, training camp body or a rotational player. So I'll go
Yeah,
C plus.
I'm gonna agree with you as C plus. They PFF likens him to Cassius Marsh, who was
Mm-hmm.
a
Yep, yep, yep.
2014 fourth round pick of the Seattle Seahawks. He had 132 total tackles. I mean, 181 total tackles, 132 total, 15 sacks. So he was a role player um, for the Bears and for the Seahawks.
Yes, I
So
do remember him.
um, this is, I mean, I definitely would give him probably that, but a C, you know, um, for this pick. Not a great pick, but again, he's going to have to be coached up. Um, so we'll see. We'll see what happens with this pick. But again, not a great. Nothing to write home about on this one. But just a depth pick, pretty much.
Absolutely. And that was all of the draft picks for the New York Jets. And obviously, we're not done. But Vinny, if you had to, and obviously the full results we have yet to see, we mentioned that early in the show. Based on what we know about these picks, where they fit into the Jets, and everything else involved, how are you grading out the draft for Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn?
I'm gonna give him, even though I rated the last couple picks and then the Arian Smith pick low. I'm gonna say a B plus just because of the Membu and Mason Taylor picks.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're grading like I mean, if you're grading on a curve, I guess a B plus would be generous. Just because when we graded the lower picks lower than you know lower than I don't know, maybe lower than what other people might have rated them, but
Yeah.
again, B plus I think is the highest you can give this team. Um, and I wouldn't be mad at you if you gave them a B
Mhm.
on this draft. They're not even they weren't close to an A as far as
No.
I'm concerned.
No.
So B plus is I'm being generous with a B plus. I think.
Um, yeah, B plus on your end. I could definitely see why in terms of the 2 picks, and you could argue even the BPA of the year is Azariah Thomas pick in terms of the traits and what he could
Right.
bring to the
Yeah.
team in
Yeah.
terms of being a
Exactly.
potential outside corner.
Yep.
I would, in my opinion, again, not being too harsh. It's just me just evaluating, the picks and overall with the holes left on the roster where I think they could have attacked. Do I dare go like a B minus C plus? Again, it's at
I wouldn't be mad at you if you did.
yeah.
I wouldn't blame you.
It's again, I like the Membu pick. It fills a need. Mason Taylor, it fills a need. As Araya Thomas, you could argue fills a need, and it was very good value. Probably better value than the Mason Taylor pick, if you want to be honest.
Hmm.
But Taylor, I like those picks. Arian Smith, not loving that pick.
I think that's when the draft kind of fell
That's when
off.
it kind of
That
fell off a little bit.
fell off the rails for me.
Malachi more of a specialist in terms of role, but again, the talent is there. You can't argue that. Maui Goa and Barron, meh. More meh on Maui Goa because Barron was more of a depth pick, and that's fine. But we could either talk about what holes we have remaining, or if you have any undrafted free agents you want to talk about.
You know, let's talk about Brady Cook a little bit.
Okay, yes, the
A
Jets did.
guy that, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the Jets did sign him as an undrafted free agent. They did not draft a quarterback, which a lot of people, including Vinny, my co-host, wanted. Kyle McCord, popular Jets fan pick, went to the Eagles. Was originally from Jersey, I think I'm not mistaken, or close to the South Jersey part, but doesn't really matter. Will Howard went to the Steelers. Shador Sanders fell all the way to round 5. He went to the Browns. Dylan Gabriel went to the Browns. But the Jets end up with Brady Cook as their quarterback 3 right now, or I could say 4 because Adrian Martinez is somehow still on the roster, interestingly enough. But Vinny, you have a little bit of insight on Brady Cook. I'd like to hear some of it.
Yeah, I mean, his grades against teams last year were kind of up and down.
Hmm.
He played horrible when it counted against Alabama last year. He got a 40.6 grade. His overall offensive grade in 2024 was very good, but it wasn't as good as his 2023. So he regressed in that last season a bit. And he's a fifth year starter. So he started in 2020 during, I believe it was the COVID year. He got that extra season.
Hmm.
So he went from a 57.9 in 2020, which I don't think he played a lot. Um,
Hmm.
and then he went to a 68, a 75, an 84.4, and then he regressed down to an 80.4. So he did not play great last year.
No,
Um, so, um, and again, I he was passed on 7 times by 32 teams.
yes,
I don't think he's going to be. I mean, I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope
of
Brady
course,
Cook is going to be great for us. I hope, maybe he's the future, but I'm not going to bet, you know,
no way.
the house on Brady Cook being the Jets starter, either a year from now or even 2 years from now. This is going to be a project. This is going to be again where coaching is going to come in, and he's going to have to be coached up.
Yeah, I think the real evaluation process will be training camp, preseason, new system, all of that. He's 23 years old. He'll be 24 at the start of the regular season. That's even if he's on the Jets roster. But the Jets also have Adrian Martinez, who saw a little bit of playing time in the preseason. Um, he was on the practice squad for a little bit as well. But the main it's somewhat important. It's not somewhat important to some fans. Jordan Travis recently retired. I think we bring that up as well with the whole Brady Cook, Adrian Martinez thing dealing with the same position. Rehab like hell from the injury that he had in college. Unfortunately, his legs just did not respond. He'll probably continue to rehab, but football is probably not in his path at this time. And he's someone I really liked in college. Probably if he just doesn't get hurt, he's probably a second round pick, an early second, mid second, where he might have been able to start. But it just sucks to see that the Jets, made a pick. They invested in him. Well, not a lot of picks. They invested a fourth round pick, but just I hate to see him go out this way. And he didn't even step on the field. He didn't even play in a preseason game.
Right. So I just again I don't know I don't know where this is going to fit in. I think I just I don't know, man. It's kind of going to be one of those things where we're going to just have to find out about this guy
Yeah,
and find out what this guy really is. I did not necessarily like Brady Cook in college.
yeah, that's fair.
I thought he was. I didn't think he was that great. His coach like talked him up as if he was like the greatest thing, and I guess that's okay because that's all coaches have to do that.
Yeah, at
You know.
least some of them prop them up.
Um, so, but I just don't think he had. He's gonna be again. He's just gonna be one of those guys that's gonna be a ways away. Um, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know what to think about this deal here. But again, he's an undrafted free agent. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, anything can happen. Anything can be possible. He could be the next Tommy DeVito, for all we know. But
And
Vinny,
what would have been, what would have been okay is if they would have picked up Tommy DeVito. If they would have picked up Tommy DeVito, I would have been okay with, okay,
yeah,
let's pick him up. I mean, he's won games in the NFL.
yeah,
I mean, he's proven he can win games in the NFL. Brady Cook doesn't really do it for me. And you already have Adrian Martinez, so
yeah.
I don't,
He's
I don't
not going
know.
to be an ultra. Should I say? He's not going to be an ultra important part of the roster, but it's worth noting, as I said, that Jordan Travis retired. Vinny, I know that you wanted a quarterback somewhere in this draft. Obviously, not first round, more like fourth or fifth round. Do you still express somewhat disappointment in the team for not going in that direction at least once?
I do. I do. I think I'm going to agree with Rich Samini. I don't agree with him all the time. I don't agree with
Yeah.
him a lot, but I do agree with his assessment that you have to pick a quarterback. Not in the first round, second round. Not even maybe the third round. You have to pick somebody
Hmm.
every year until you have one. What does it hurt to take? What would it have hurt to take McCord? Um, in what was it, the fourth, fifth round that he got taken?
I'm going to double check. I think it was the fifth. I could be wrong.
Yeah. So what would it have taken? I mean, who did we get in the fifth round? We got Muaga
Maui Goa and
and
Barron.
Marigoa and Barron. I would have been okay with
Actually,
McCord.
McCord was a sixth round pick. He was taken
Okay.
sixth.
So
Same thing with Will
you know,
Howard.
and we traded up to get some of those that one of those guys, right?
Yeah.
So I would have liked to seen McCord and then go from there. But I feel like, and I don't think they knew that Jordan Travis was gonna retire.
Mhm.
Um, that would have been the big story if they did. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know,
Okay.
and that that this was kind of a shock to them. And I don't believe the people saying that Jordan Travis tried to screw them over.
No, I don't think
I
either of
don't
them.
believe in any of that. I think because I know last year he had problems with the old regime. Um, but I think this is a new regime. I don't think he's holding that against
Yeah, why would
this
he why would
regime
he
at
have
all.
malice against the new regime?
Right. Yeah, I don't think he did.
That
So
wouldn't
any
make
of those
any
people,
sense.
right? Any of those people that say that, I think they just don't know. But I do just think that we could have had McCord. I would have rather have had him, but we get what we get, and I guess we're gonna have to trust this coaching staff. If we, again, it's only May. We have June, July. This isn't even what the roster may even look like. We
Absolutely.
may,
There's
you know,
another wave of free
there's
agency.
another wave of free agency. There's more. Let's look at the roster in August. Let's evaluate the roster in August and go from there.
Absolutely, with the quarterback position. I agree with your sentiments. For the most part, I'm kind of oblivious. No, I shouldn't say oblivious. I'm like rather not as concerned that we didn't pick a quarterback, but I wouldn't have hated quarterback had we filled out how I would have how filled out the draft how I would have liked in terms of picking another defensive tackle or drafting another wide receiver where it's like more of a okay, this is like a luxury pick. This is you could just take a risk on where you could draft a Will Howard. And I'd like Will Howard too. McCord also had a bounce back year at Syracuse. So I wouldn't have minded that either had they filled out some of these selections a little more appropriately in the later rounds. Again, nitpick. I know it's the later rounds, but this team still has holes. Um, in terms of just the overall roster, where it stands now, again, you mentioned it perfectly. This roster can change by August. Free agency still has not, ended. There's still a second wave because no longer is there compensatory picks attached. So, Vinny, name like, or just talk about the roster. Like, how concerned are you with like some of the positions? I think wide receiver, I think, has to be one of them.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely concerned about wide receiver. I'm a little concerned at D tackle.
Yeah, I would be too.
Um, I'm not as bad at safety anymore. I was really concerned about safety because we haven't had great safeties
Yeah.
on this team. I'm not worried about the secondary in a whole. I'm not worried about anymore.
No, no.
Um, but again, defensive tackle, I'm worried about. Offensive line, I'm not worried about anymore. You know,
No.
that was a big question mark last year. I'm not. I wouldn't put that question mark. Although I would say we're young. We're young on
We're
the
young. We
offensive
are
line now,
young.
so it could go the other way real quick next year if these players don't turn
If
out
they're
to
not being
be
coached
what
up.
right, if they're not being coached up right. Um, I am a little concerned, and this is going to sound weird. I'm concerned at running back a little bit because
Interesting.
because I'm because I'm looking at Brees and I'm saying, was that just an off year? Was he just being, or is that injury just not
Healing.
progressing the way it should? Now Braylon Allen's great, but Braylon Allen ain't going to be your
A
every
back.
down A back all the time, at least at this point. So now you have to rely on um, who was the
Isaiah Davis.
Isaiah Davis. Um, you know, I think I mean, I wouldn't have taken a running back in this draft, unless it was the top three that were in the draft. But
Yeah.
I think I would have at least maybe signed one.
They did.
And that sounds, and I know they signed one, but
They signed a
you know,
UDFA, and that would
yeah,
be Donovan Edwards. I'm
Donovan
actually not a
Edwards,
I'm not a huge fan of Donovan Edwards.
yeah,
I'm not going to lie to you. Watching some of his
yeah,
tape in Michigan, it's just like he didn't seem so fast. I'll pull up my scouting report.
right,
Again, not a huge deal
right,
because he'll be fighting for a roster spot. He could be just a
right,
camp body, but
right, right. But here's the thing: if you're gonna not have wide receivers, you
you got to
better load up on running back.
hmm
you know,
absolutely,
you
especially if
you better have a good run game.
you're going to be ground and pound team, as they say.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, what did that Detroit team have that we really don't have right now? They had a 1-2 punch at running back.
Yes, Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery.
Exactly. And we don't have that. We don't have that at all. So if you're trying to replicate Detroit, I don't on the offensive side, you're not really doing it right now. But again, this all is alleviated if Brees Hall goes back to what he was,
Yeah.
and we have that 1-2 of Brees Hall and Braylon Allen, like we thought we were going to have last year. But if Brees Hall, I'm a little concerned though about that. So
I would be too, and I'll explain my thoughts as well. They were like, I think Josina Anderson said on day two, where it was like there was conversations where the Jets might trade Brees Hall. It's interesting because Brees Hall, I don't think we've seen the best out of him yet. Obviously, before injury, he looked really good in 2022.
right,
2023 still recovering. 2024 still recovering. Where I think it started to get worrisome. Even like there was even like at the goal line, the Jets would have plays for Brees Hall, and Hall just would not punch it in. Braylon Allen had to be the back at the goal line sets where he had to be the guy to punch in those touchdowns, even if they weren't. He was the better guy at the goal line. But the thing with Brees Hall is, you wonder where the injury's at. He's in the last year of his contract, so if the Jets say, and I'm not wishing this on them, let's just say they start like, I don't know, let's say week 8 or 9 is the trade deadline. They start like 3-6 wherever. Are you trading Brees Hall? Is Brees Hall having a good season? Was it worth entertaining Brees Hall at the draft, where it's like, okay, we could trade picks for Brees Hall and get another pick for this year if the Jets decide to trade him during the draft? But now during the post draft process, it's either like, again, I hate to be this guy. I'm not sure if I would even resign Brees Hall at the end of the season. We have no idea what this year is going to look like in terms of what's in store for him, especially that he's going to be getting less carries. The Jets said that they were going to do a running back by committee system, and Brees Hall didn't seem to be too happy about that. But overall, it's not like Hall has played, I'm sorry, up to his potential. So the Jets might just have to entertain trading him. And I like Brees too.
Oh no, I like Brees as well, but I mean, what year is he in right now? Is he in his third
22,
year?
23, 24. This is going to be 25, number four.
So this is his fourth year.
Yeah, he was a second rounder, so he doesn't get that fifth year option.
Right. So, but I don't know, man. I think and I don't and actually I don't think they would have given him because I know they gave Garrett, they gave JJ, and they gave
Sauce, the fifth
Sauce
year
the fifth
option.
year, which were all warranted, even though we know JJ was hurt and coming off an
Yeah,
injury, and it's going to take him a little while to get back to speed. But those were all smart moves, picking up all their fifth year options,
absolutely.
were good moves. I don't think they would have done that with Brees. I think
No,
they would have let him play out his fourth year, see what he had done. The running back market, obviously, it was kind of reset with Saquon, I guess, but he's nowhere near Saquon Barkley at this point. But
no.
you know, I think you got to see how he plays this year and then go from there. But again, I wouldn't have mind seeing you know, another running back as far as like a good, not an undrafted free agent, but just maybe signing someone or
Let me see who's on
maybe.
the market. I'll answer your
But
question.
yeah, if somebody's on the market, maybe you sign one. But again, you can only have a certain amount of you know, and,
Certain
and you
amount of
only
guys, certain
and
amount
you
of
only
cap,
have a certain amount of cap space too, right? So
and you still got to sign these draft picks. They're
and
not
you
a lot
still
of
right,
draft picks.
right, right, right.
Let me
So
see who's available at running back. So, let's see, available. Here we go. You have Jamal Williams, you have Gus Edwards, you have Jeff Wilson, you have Nick Chubb, you have Naeem
right,
Hines, you have Amir Abdullah. A lot of rotation backs, so it's not
right,
impossible that they could sign one.
right, and like guys like Chubb that are coming off injuries. I know he's like a year removed, but he didn't have
No,
a great year. I mean, he'd be cheap enough that I would take a chance on him. I've always liked Nick Chubb,
me
so
too.
um, I think there's a guy that you could bring in to take a chance on. I mean, um, because what if you start the season out and Brees is the same as he was last year? Where do
That's
you go from
problematic.
there?
That's very problematic.
Again, Braylon Allen's a good running back. I don't know if he could be your bell cow and run, you know,
Hmm.
all that in a season. It's his second season. So but you're gonna find out because if Brees isn't what he's supposed to be, you're gonna find out what Braylon Allen is too. So in that sense, maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
Because what is the split going to be really then? Because if
that's
Braylon
true.
doesn't turn out to be what he's supposed to be, you're going to see Braylon Allen get like what 60% of the snaps as opposed to maybe you split them 40, or 35 or whatever.
Hmm.
Maybe he goes up to 60. Then maybe I just don't know. And again, we don't know what the snap counts are going to be. So
Absolutely, absolutely, without a doubt.
what they're thinking. So.
And another thing too is that Jamal Williams is a free agent, as I mentioned,
Yep.
and Jamal Williams was a former Lion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He worked with he worked with he worked with the Lions. I think it was 2022, if I'm not mistaken. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
last year, but he was very good with the Lions, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying he was the same with the Saints,
Right.
but maybe him as a camp body, just to maybe feed Brees a little more motivation.
Yeah, yeah. You almost have to do. I think you almost have to do it. And then if he wants to leave because like his role has changed, well, he kind of. I mean, he came off an injury. He played well, and then he regressed. So I mean, I don't know how long can you just say it's the injury doing it. Um, I don't know. Again, I'm not. I don't know how long it takes, but I mean, that's part of the reason I think why we don't have a quarterback. Also, is why we didn't re-sign Aaron Rodgers too. But that's another thing in its own right. But um, I don't know, man. I think we need to sign a running back, and I think it needs to be somebody a veteran. The more I think about it, the more. And when you said all those names, I said, yeah, I think we need to go into a veteran and see what we can do there. Because again, if we don't have a runner in a running system, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Fields. It's going
Yeah,
to put a lot of pressure on that wide receiver room. You're gonna you're gonna have to rely on our tight ends more because Ruckert's. I don't think Ruckert is it. Um, and then Mason Taylor has to step up as a rookie. I
yeah,
mean, it's going to throw you off totally. So
it will, it
um,
will,
you got to
and
have
it,
a running game in this league. So
especially if you're having the offensive line to do it.
right,
And as I said,
right,
Jamal Williams, perfect example. Gus Edwards, these are all
yeah.
capable backs of just being in a rotation. They're not. You don't have to be. They don't have to be number one. But
Uh,
again, just capable rotation guys.
and
That's all I need.
and who knows, Brees may be better behind this offensive line that we've
That's
improved.
true.
So again, it's May. I do have again, that concern is just a very small concern. Is it like a five-alarm fire? No. Is it a cause for concern? A little bit. My bigger concern is defensive tackle, defensive line, and wide receiver right now.
Yeah.
So those are the two main things and then quarterback could be a problem if but we don't know that yet. So I'm not going to say anything about quarterback at this point. So
Yeah, definitely as well. Defensive tackle, I think, is a question mark. As much as a wide receiver, I mean, some other wide receivers that are available. Keenan Allen is still available because I think he was either cut by the Bears or he was a 1 year free agent. Amari Cooper still available. Wouldn't trust Nelson Aguilar, DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd, just like some camp bodies overall. Because as I said earlier, when I was talking about the wide receiver position, if you're going to properly evaluate Justin Fields, you want as much talent around him as possible. But again, the thing that I mentioned was the coaching. They're severely relying on the coaching with some of these positions: defensive tackle, wide receiver, tight end to an even extent, because their tight end room is Mason Taylor, to Jeremy Ruckert, who has not been
right.
good as a Jet, and Stone Smart, who has basically had a minimal, somewhat role last year with the Chargers.
Mhm.
And Chargers, it was surprising because Chargers fans were even mad that they lost out on him in free agency, but he has yet to hit his potential. So I think it's the coaching staff thinking that they're going to try to get the best out of these guys, and it's a risk. It's a risk.
Yeah, and again, who is the veteran that these position groups are going to fall back to? You don't have that anymore.
No.
I mean, you got Lazard. I mean, is he a guy you want your young wide receivers to fall back on? And yeah, maybe it's Garrett Wilson is that leader in the wide receiver room. But who do you have on the offensive line, or who do you
Yeah.
have? I mean, you got Quinnen on the defensive line, and yeah, you got linebackers. But I mean, the secondary. Who do you have in the secondary that you can? You don't have guys that can be that coach on the field. You're going to have to rely, like you said, on your coaches. You know, Aaron Rodgers was a big part, as much as people don't want to, maybe not admit it. He was a big part of being that coach on the field. Um, whether to the detriment or whether you think of it as a detriment or positive,
Mhm.
it was still he was still that guy. Um, and I don't know, man. With a lot of young players on this team, I think having a veteran like Tyler Boyd is a good fit. I think
Capable.
he's capable. He's that veteran presence. And yeah, you did sign Josh Reynolds as that veteran presence too. But why not have another guy like Tyler Boyd or one of those other guys to step in?
Who
I wanted Lockett because I thought he would be that guy,
Yeah,
but I guess we didn't want to pay that money. That's fine. But again, I think you still need those guys.
absolutely. And again, as I said, they're placing a lot of emphasis on coaching, which could be a reward, but it also could be very risky. I think the Jets even did the same thing in 2021 when Salah took over and that team took over because that team didn't have a lot of talent, but they relied heavily on their coaching. And some of those positions were really well coached, like the defensive line eventually, and the linebackers, and eventually the secondary with the corners. But offense was bad. Offense was bad, but it's
Right.
going to be interesting to see this team throughout training camp, and how the rest of the roster plays out. And we're just giving our concerns as fans. We're analyzing. We're not saying this is a finished product. It's not.
Mhm.
We'll have a ways to go before August. But Vinny, if you have any final thoughts to offer on the draft or anything like that regarding what we've talked about today, you could feel free, and also plug Pinstripes and Pile Drivers. What are you guys doing over there?
Pinstripes and Pile Drivers. We have a new wrestling podcast coming out this week, so look out for that. We do have, I believe, we have a Yankee stream coming up
Hmm.
soon. I'm not sure on the date exactly. I don't have that in front of me, but we're doing a lot of good things. We just had a live stream last weekend, which I know you were there for
Double header.
half of that. We had a double header. I think that went well. And as far as the Jets go, I really don't have a lot more to say. I think again, we're in May. I think there's only so much we can that people can talk about. I think people are milking a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
I think people are looking for clicks.
Yeah, it's gonna be that
But
time, Vinny, if we're
it's
gonna
that
be
time of
honest.
year where we're slowing down a little bit until we get to, July when training camp starts. Um, you know, and then when rosters are finalized in August. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's the motto of this team. We'll see, because that could be used as a positive thing, or that could be used as a negative attribution, or I should say a connotation. But we gave
Exactly.
our thoughts on the draft. We talked about the quarterback position. We talked about our concerns with the roster. But this is not a finished product, folks. We really have yet to see what goes on in the field, and that's not, as I said, not a negative connotation. That's not a positive connotation. We'll see. It's to me, folks. It's about the results. It is not about the process. Process don't mean shit if, excuse my language, if we
Mhm.
haven't been,
Right.
making the playoffs for the last 14 years. It's about
Exactly.
the results. It's about what's on the
Exactly.
field, folks.
Yep. Yep. That's 100% true. 100%.
Yeah, folks. With that being said, but thank you for watching episode 3 of the Gangrene Chronicles podcast from Vinny to my left or to my right, however you may see it, and Luca talking to you. Don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when we go live or drop a new episode. So, plenty more content to come, especially hopefully training camp comes fast. Football will soon be in action in a couple months, but regardless, it's been great talking to y'all. Have a nice week and go Jets.